The noise of that clock is very soothing. Good afternoon, folks. I can see you're all coming through the door. As you do, don't forget we have got a chat section where you can put a hello to everybody, but please remember to put it to panelists and attendees so that I'm not the only person to see it. We've also got a question and answer box. If you do have any questions, please pop them in that box, purely so I don't miss them in the chat, and then I will, read them out to Nigel as we go along. So we'll just wait another second or two because people are still coming through the door. Quick look at some of the names. Bevan David Walker, Chris, David, oh, two Davids, Dawn, hi Dawn, Emma, another Emma. Hang on, who else have we got? Freak, Gavin, oh, it's jumped. Ian, I'm going to pronounce this one wrong, I'm sure. Yawn, Nick, two Pauls, a Peg, Peter, two Peters, Sydney, Tom, Trevor, Ivan. Lots of new names on there that I haven't seen before. So anyway, I'm going to hand over to you, Nigel, because I think there'll be a lot of people as curious as me as what this is going to be about. Photography, an art form, question mark.
Well, thank you very much. Firstly, thanks to the Guild for inviting me back. Doesn't always happen when I go to places. Thank you to all of you for joining me as well. I know that there are people in other parts of the world rather than the UK joining us today, and some of the reasons for that will be a little obvious as we go through the presentation later. My aim is to talk for around about 40 to 45 minutes and to then answer any questions, take any sort of comments that people have. I look forward to this because it helps me to think things through and to learn as much as anything else. And as Steve said, it's a bit of an intriguing title really. So let's just try and consider what it is we might cover today. I wanted to think about whether all photographs are art or not, and if not, why not? What is a work of art anyway? And should they be in galleries, art galleries, or where else? My local art galleries, my very local art gallery has virtually no photography, in fact has no photography in its permanent collection, which I've been bugging them about for a while, but they don't seem to want to acquire any at the moment. Whereas my nearest large gallery, the Ferrans, has quite a good acquisition. It recently acquired some Francesca Woodmans, for instance. And I think that's great because it does mean that photography is then seen perhaps more as a way of artistic expression than merely taking a snap of some sort. I'm going to explore some of that. I'm going to give some examples as we go through. But what started me on this journey was an article by Jonathan Jones, who's an art critic with The Guardian newspaper here in the UK, and back in 2014. And he argued that photography was not an art, it was a technology. He said we don't have any excuse to ignore the obvious fact in the age of digital cameras, when the most beguiling high-definition images and effects are available to millions. My iPad can take panoramic views that are gorgeous to look at. Does that make me an artist? No. It just makes my tablet one hell of a device. And that riled me. That made me feel very frustrated and angry because my own experience of art has been that it is much more than technology. I first discovered art. I didn't come from a very artistic family. It wasn't something we discussed a lot, thought about a great deal. And I discovered art at my museum and gallery in Liverpool, where I was born, the Walker Art Gallery. And it just so happened that the Walker Art Gallery had a biennial exhibition, which was a prize-winning exhibition and lots of artists, very good artists, entered. And the year that I discovered it, I was in my mid-teens, happened to be the year that David Hockney won. And it started to help me look at art, although the main collection at the Walker Art Gallery is a rather beautiful collection of largely Victorian paintings. So I started then to become interested in art, to think about what it was. And I think it's a lot more than a technology. And if we took the argument that Jonathan Jones makes here, then I'd have to say, if the statement was true, all art is a technology. Ceramicists often use wheels to make their art. That's a technology. Painters use oil paints in tubes, and until that technology became available to them, they were very restricted in what and how they could paint and where they could paint in particular. Without printing machines, we wouldn't have prints. So technology is a means. That's all. It gives us the means to make art, and it gives us the means to make a lot of very different art forms. And therefore, photography it has the means to enable us to apply our experience, our ideas, our perceptions, our thoughts in a way that creates art. Maybe not all photography is art, and we need to just consider that a little bit further down the line, because if things don't fit into what we agree may or may not be art, then probably it isn't art. And I'm sure that when I was much younger and taking photographs of my children on holiday, I would never have thought about it as creating art, because although it was an application by me of my experience, I didn't have very many ideas or perceptions apart from creating memories and things that I could look at. So I looked around for a definition of art that I could use to say something about and relate to photography. And what I came up with was this explanation, this definition from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, which has some very interesting words in it, because it says that it's something, art is something created with imagination and skill that is beautiful and expresses important ideas and feelings. Now, there are 6 words there that I think are important to us and which we can use to test out whether photographs are art or not. And you can see those highlighted in red. The word beautiful might leave us with some challenges. We'll come to that in a minute. And I've also highlighted in bold the word important, because that's going to be different for everybody. And in one sense, art is a very personal thing. When I retired some years ago now, I opened an art gallery, which was something I'd wanted to do for a long time. Never had the opportunity or the time to do it. I think it was quite a successful art gallery in many ways, although I became disillusioned with sitting in the same space for 6 days a week and quite often 12 to 14 hours a day, because we ran a lot of evening classes and talks and so on as well. So I got to the stage where the lease was up on the building and I gave it up because I wanted to do more with my photography and I wasn't able to. But what I learned from that is that many people like to look at art, like to buy art, and that what they think is important or beautiful differs hugely depending on their experience. So I'll come to that in a minute or two, but maybe we should just consider some of those other words first. The first few photographs here are all photographs I've taken because I can talk about them, but I've also borrowed some other people's work with their permission, I have to say, and I'll mention them and how I acquired them and so on in a few minutes when we get there. So first of all, we talked about skill, and I think skill is about using the technology to get what you want. This shot is a shot of a cycle race called the Tour de Yorkshire. It goes virtually past my house every year, and every time I've seen photographs of the Tour de Yorkshire, They're super sharp, they're shot super fast. They usually have people coming down hills towards a bend or going round the bend or splashing through water and fords or rushing towards you because you've got a long lens on and you're half a mile away and they're coming straight at you and you've just got time to get out of the way. And I wanted to move away from that because it didn't show me a lot about the excitement of a race. So I went out 4 days prior to the race. This is the women's race that started just down the road. So I knew when I found the space I was going to use, because I knew that there would be nobody else in that space, that I had about 4 minutes, maybe 4¼ minutes to wait until they came past. And I went and I shot some test shots about 4 days before in weather that was roughly similar. And that meant that I could test the focal lengths, I could set up the timing for a shot like this, and I could practice with other cars and cycles that were passing by. It had to be pretty exact. I was there about an hour before I needed to be to get everything set up on the day. And this is the resulting shot. I also knew that I would have a split second, and I really mean split second, to take the photo I wanted, because that leading wheel on the left-hand side of the picture would disappear very quickly. Between entering the picture and leaving was probably less than a second. So I had to act quickly. And that's, for me, about using the technology and developing your skill to a point where you can get what you want. Whether it's a good photograph or an artistic photograph, beside the point really, you'll decide that for yourselves. But that's what I would mean by use of the word skill. The word beautiful, well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Second, Nigel, because we have got a question relevant to this, and if you're going to cover it as we go on, please tell me and I'll kill it. And I thought it was a fabulous image, by the way. It's in response to your definition. Who decides what is important, and does art always have to be beautiful? I think you're just coming on to the beautiful bit, obviously.
The answer is it depends on your point of view. Depends on what's important to you. It depends on what you see as beauty. I can only speak for myself. When I look at something that's beautiful, I look at it and think that's beautiful. If I look at things, sometimes I know that other people will like them, but I don't see it as beautiful. When I sold art, I had to have a whole range of things, some of which I did not see as beautiful, some of which I clearly saw as beautiful. But I knew that when people came into my gallery and looked at the photographs or the paintings or the prints, they would find something in things that I didn't like, and they would say that they were beautiful or important to them. And often it's about familiarity, I think. Things that people are familiar with, or things that people have been told are artistic, they believe to be artistic. But that's a personal view. I have no proof to back that up at all. But beautiful, I was going to say, I mean, you know, I think it's about making an image into a pleasing composition. This happened to be a morning in France, in a town called Dom, and we got there, the mist was just lifting, the sun was coming down, it was September, the trees were a lovely colour. This artist was just setting up a stall in the marketplace under the trees, happened to attract a passerby walking his dog, and the composition and the light just fell into place, as these things sometimes do. Whether that is a beautiful image or not, I don't know. But I enjoyed looking at it and I enjoyed making it. So beauty is very much in the eye of the beholder. And I think it's a good question to ask, what is beauty and what is important? And my answer is, sadly, I can't tell you. It's going to be different for everybody. I think there's the idea of creation, creating something is different. This is from a series of photographs I'm working on at the moment. It's the use of in-camera facilities to give me multiple exposures. The sequence is about the lives of older men after they retire, and it won't be finished for another year. still got people to interview in relation to this. And I have ideas to take images that I haven't been able to take because of lockdown. But using post-production or in-camera facilities can often make us give a picture much more impact than it has initially. And it is worth thinking about what the impact is that you want that to have on people. And this image is open to any interpretation you want. For me, it was about degrees of uncertainty for people, but as they described it to me. But that use of in-camera facility and post-production is quite important. And I'm going to say a little bit more about in-camera facility for using multiple exposures later, because when Rebecca and I first talked about me doing this talk, she suggested that was the topic. And I said, look, I'll put something in, but I don't think that I have enough to say to fill an hour just on that topic. And I'd rather see it as part of the creation of art rather than just the taking of a photograph. And imagination means that we can begin to consider what it is we're trying to show. So rather than just shoot a rose for this shot, I deconstructed the rose. Roses are inevitably associated with love and strong feelings. So I made a heart out of the petals, and the resulting photograph you can see there. But that's about applying thought and originality, creating something new. We know that Ansel Adams always said that you don't take a photograph, you make it. And for good luck, he added that it was the 8 inches behind the camera that was the most important thing in taking a photograph. And clearly, and my expectation is that everyone watching this has certain technical skills. They know how to set the camera up to get the shot that they want, by and large, given whatever light and so on there might be. But I think you can do more. I think you can create a picture from something that you have by applying some additional thinking to it and some originality in what it is you're wanting to show people. And then you've got this thing about ideas and feelings, and they're different for everyone. This is a shot that was part of a sequence called The Red Dress. And it was late at night, there was a phone box. I put the red dress in and went through some bushes and shot. And several people have said to me, I find that really spooky. I find that very scary. And that's because people will associate with a shot like this things that they have read, things they have seen. They might associate stories from movies, horror movies, whatever it is. And this was a sequence that was about, and I talked about the red dress last time, so I don't want to repeat that too much, but this was from a sequence that was looking at the lives of women and the need for us to be able to give more respect and equality to women to make their lives easier. And so this was one of those shots, and it was meant to be scary, it was meant to ask some questions. So we come to important and what's important. The next two shots I'm going to show you, this shot and another one, were specifically created as part of a series about mental health. And in some of the shots, the cage door is closed. The cage is the central thing in all of this. In some, the cage door is closed, which is showing that it is a much more challenging thing for a person to perhaps deal with. In others, the cage door is open, which shows that people might be able to move towards releasing some of the things that might be burdening them. But the question for me about this is this a commercial shoot? Is this an artistic shoot? If you're doing a shot for someone for a purpose, you need to be clear about what it is they're wanting you to show. If I was shooting a car, I guess that the things that people would want me to show in that photograph would be different. They may want me to just show the car so people knew what it looked like. They may want me to show that car moving and moving quickly or swerving around a bend or whatever else we see in car ads. In this, I had a bit more leeway to shoot, so I tended to make this more thoughtful in order that people would consider something different in terms of what they were seeing. And I wanted people, often my shoots had to do with social issues, just mentioned feminism and women in our society, and what the lives that they lead sometimes because of attitudes. And this is a similar one, and you'll see others as we go through as well. So for me, that's an important thing. That's an important topic. And it was important for me to consider how I actually shot these pictures and relayed that. It wasn't so much a technical challenge as an artistic one for me. I think there's another thing we have to add to all this, which is interpretation, because when we look at a picture, we interpret it in a certain way. When other people look at that picture, they may interpret it in a very, very different way. This was shot, I'd been having a conversation with a friend of mine called Lee Karen Stowe, very good photographer, her work shown all over the world. And she has done a huge amount of work with women and women in war. And one of the sequences of pictures that she did over a period of a year was to catch up with women in war and to tell a story of the poppy, how it became a symbol of war. And it started in the United States. A lot of people think it started in the UK, but it didn't. It started in the United States and then became an international symbol. White poppies tend to be for peace, peaceability. Red poppies represent blood. And we've been talking about that, and I thought, how would I represent that with a poppy? Most shots you'll see are shots like the one that you can see behind me now, which is a field of poppies, or maybe an individual poppy. This, I wanted to do something much more close up, much more intimate, because I think that lends itself to intimacy. But what other people would see when they looked at this will inevitably be their own interpretation, will inevitably be different to me, because their experiences, their thoughts, the things that are important to them will all be part of that interpretation and will be different to mine. Are all photographs art? Well, it's a good question. I think probably not. I think some snaps, and I would say that what I did for many years with my family and my holiday were snaps. They were taken for remembrance. Some will have artistic merit, but be taken for very different reasons. So wedding photos, commercial photographs, pet portraits, all of these things. I've seen some really good artistic photographs. I doubt that many of them are going to end up in museums or art galleries, because that's not what they are taken for. They're taken as memories, or they're taken to sell things in commercial terms. And that's all good, but I'm probably not going to end up with an advert for a drain cleaner on my wall or in a museum. I might, if it was really, really artistic and done with a degree of humour, but it's less likely. So I'm not sure that we can say that many of those things will get to fall into, although they might have artistic merit, might not get to fall into the art category. I think you can ask yourself whether you want to hang something in your home or expect to see it in an art gallery and making some of that. I think you can also ask what the intention of the photographer was. What message were they trying to convey? And those things might give you some clue, along with the other words, as to whether or not a photograph you look at is art or not. Now, it just happened that whilst I was preparing this, I came across the beginnings of a new magazine called Frames, which is going to appear in the autumn, this autumn, going to be sold internationally. I started to look at, they have a Facebook page, which you can ask to join, and if you're lucky, you'll let in. And I started to look at some of the work on there. And when I knew that I was going to do this talk, I wanted to show some of that work as examples of photographs that I thought had some artistic merit and why I thought they had artistic merit. So I contacted the photographers And I want to thank them. There are 10 of them involved in this, and you're going to see 10 photographs now by them. This is by Gary Bieber. Gary's over in the USA. If you're watching, Gary, hi. I know that you might be watching this later. This is a slide that was actually in a house that Gary bought, and he wrote a little piece about this, which I'm going to just read a part of. He said, 3 years ago, my wife and I moved to Sag Harbor, Long Island, from Sag Harbor in Long Island to Southern Ohio. Found a perfect house, but the pool slide was not to my liking. And the first thing I wanted to do was remove it. But strangely enough, the more I looked at it, the more meaning it had for me, and the more I liked it. And over time, the slide morphed into an art object and became my muse and metaphor for suburban life. He's now taken several hundred photographs of the slide, all the way through the year, different times of day and night. And this one struck me as a really good example of a photograph that shows a lot of artistic merit. The slide is beautifully lit, it's reflected in the pool. We're not quite sure what time of day or night it is, but it looks like it's nighttime, certainly early evening. The line of trees, poplar trees behind it is pretty good in defining the shape of that slide. Gary's got a whole series of these now, I know. And he says, while growing up, I always admired Monet's Cathedral series. I am no Monet, and my pool slide certainly isn't Rouen Cathedral. But nonetheless, it's always there for me, and I love to capture the changes in colour and light. So he's had people who've posed with it. His dog often poses with it. And I think it's a really good example of how someone can use light and the mood, and actually what's just around you, what's important to you, to create a very influential and moving photograph. This is Trish Kouros. Trish is in Canada. And everyone's given me permission to use these, I have to say. And some of these will probably eventually appear in the Frames magazine once it's published. This is called Morning at Ericsson, and Ericsson used to be a jeweller's, it's now a cafe. Trish, I know, was walking past there one morning and just saw the light as it falls in there. And it struck me that that is a hugely artistic photograph. I want to know more about that place. I want to know more about where it is. I want to know more about what happens there. And the use of negative space in that, you know, half of that photograph has nothing in it. It's a black space. And the use of negative space in that makes what you can see and the gentleness and the softness of the light even more important. It's a cafe now, it's used as a cafe. This was one morning and it wasn't open. So the shot rests there. So thank you, Trish, for letting me use that photograph and show it. This is a photograph by Lopamudra Talukdar. I hope I've got your name right, Lopamudra, if you're watching. It's called Self. And again, it's reminiscent of some other shots that I've seen and admired in the past. People like Saul Leiter, who used to often shoot through windows with moisture on, get multi-layered pictures. And this is a photograph taken in a mirror, which I think just shows that you can make the ordinary extraordinary. This is not just a selfie. This becomes a photograph and a work of art. There are reflections in this. We can't tell what they are. It looks as though perhaps there is some curtaining behind there that might have some plants and flowers and leaves on it, but it makes us want to look at the photograph, not because of the person in it, but because of the shape, the colour, and the textures in it. And that's quite important, I think, in thinking about how you make a photograph. And some thoughts been applied to that. Here's some intentional camera movement. Pavel Kreček lives in the Czech Republic. posted this recently, some very nice saturated colours. We know exactly what it is. We know it's a path, but it doesn't just look like a photograph. It looks as though some thought has been applied to the final product. Would I have this on my wall? Yes, I probably would, because I like it. I like the colours, and you can often sell things just on the basis of colour. If people like particular colours, then they will certainly buy your work. And I like that because it's both obvious and unobvious at the same time, quite abstracted. This photograph by John Lester Griffiths, and John lives in the UK. It's called All She Had. All She Had. He and another photographer were in Vietnam with a guide, and they walked past this woman's house, and she acknowledged them in a very minimal way as they walked past. And they went back and they asked if they could photograph her, and she acquiesced to that. And John tells me they were there for about 20 minutes or so. And the one thing, there's a lot about this photograph that I think is to like. There's the simplicity of it, there's the composition, the large bowl at one side, the woman central, the light coming through the window and in turn falling through the slats on the bed to the floor, that little brush of twigs at one side, the colour of the window behind and the shutters on it, and the bars on there. But more than anything, what makes this shot for me are the red flip-flops on the floor. And John actually did position that. He said it's the only thing I changed in the whole photograph. They're just at the apex of that triangle of light, and they provide some colour that leads the eye in to the main subject of the photograph. And I thought that was a lovely photograph, well taken, which qualifies for the idea that it's art through that use of colour and the positioning of that. And yes, it's a chance photograph in a sense. It wasn't established, it wasn't set up. But a good photographer will see opportunities and seize them when they can. This is, again, nice conversation going on here. By the looks of it, these look like figures, look like heads, they look like people having a talk. David Robinson is over in the States as well. And this is actually a shot of some smoke, which is coming up from an incense stick, which is taken and then mirrored. And again, it's about that application of thought, looking at one of these and seeing it as a head and then being able to mirror it and turn it into a conversation. It's about applying some thought to what you're doing as a photographer and getting over a conversation, getting over an image to people that implies it is something other than what it might actually be. And I think that's great. So thank you very much, David, as well, for letting me use that photograph. This is Roland's Patrigan, who is a teacher of photography down on the West Coast. I think Roland said he was hoping to watch and join us this morning while he had his 6 a.m. coffee. So I hope that I hope you've managed to get your coffee and you're waking up now, Roland, and sending you back to sleep again. Clearly, in terms of what is happening at the moment in the world, this is a statement. It's an important statement. For me, it is a photograph that has been set up. You won't come across this anywhere, at least I hope you won't. Here is a person who has been bound and blindfolded. They have a case with them, which implies, I suppose, travel, movement, and the person is actually quite well dressed. So we wonder how they've got into this position. We wonder who it is who has captured them, kidnapped them maybe, tied them up in this way. I also wonder when the next train is due, but that might just be me. And I wonder what's going to happen. Is this person going to be rescued or not? If I'm here, and I'm the viewer of that photograph, do I have a responsibility? That's what it makes me think. So the photograph is designed to make me think. It's not just designed as an object of art, it's designed as a challenge. And I like the fact that it's challenging me. Stuart Graham is up in northeast of the UK. He's done a whole series recently of tidal photographs. This one is called Twisting Tide. And to some extent, we could say, well, there are lots of photographs out there which have a neutral density filter on and a long exposure of water that changes it. I think this is slightly better than many that I've seen, partly because it's nice to catch that wave coming in. And the composition, therefore, is much greater. The colours in this too don't make it obvious that we're looking at sand or water just in front of us. We might wonder what's in that bit of negative space. And the sky as well has movement in it, which I quite like. And I think there's a lot of, it's about using the skill and the technology available to you to create a photograph. So thank you, Stuart, for letting me show that picture as well. Norman Metavier is another Canadian photographer, and was out one morning when he saw this scene shot through the cafe window. The cafe had been closed down because of the pandemic, but the colours in it are gorgeous. The eyes easily let in through the centre of the photograph. The reflective surface gives it much more depth than you might imagine. And we can see that it's in the middle of an area which looks like offices, Midtown area probably. And perhaps knowing it was taken during a pandemic, we might wonder when these people are going to be able to get back to work. Will their business survive? I think there's a lot of questions in there for me, but it's the gorgeousness of the colour that caught my eye. And again, it's using the colour just as Pavel did in his photograph of the path. And finally, in this little sequence, Tomasz, and now I'm going to get your name completely wrong, Shebriatowski. Sorry, Tomasz. I'll get you to tell me when we meet, and then I won't get it wrong again. Tomasz is Polish but lives in the UK now. And this is a very simple photograph. We've probably seen similar ones to this before. It's got quite a nice lot of noise in it, deliberately created to give atmosphere. This is the sort of photograph we might have looked at and seen in the 30s and 40s and 50s photographers would shoot. And there's nothing wrong with echoing some of those very artistic photographs that were taken earlier on and updating them in some way. And I like this because of its simplicity. I like the fact it's mono. It's better in mono than colour probably. And I like the fact that there's so much negative space again in it. And it concentrates just on the one thing. I like the use of mono in this particular photograph, Observations 3. So thank you to those 10 people who've let me use their photographs. And I want to just say something about why we might want to apply all of our thought to these things, because there's a number that was obvious a couple of years ago. It was estimated in 2018 that 4 billion people worldwide had a smartphone with a camera. This didn't include digital cameras that were just cameras. This was just people with smartphones. A conservative estimate was that 1.2 trillion pictures would be taken. But if every person who had a smartphone took 10 pictures a day, that would exceed 14 trillion. That's 14 and 12 noughts. It's a lot. If you looked at each one for 1 second, every one of those photographs, assuming 14 trillion, the higher number, it would take 162,000 days or 483 years to see each one for 1 second. So when you're taking a photograph and you want it to be lasting in some way, you have to ask yourself, what is it that's going to make people pay attention to that? Because no one's going to sit and look at all 14 trillion photographs for 483 years, by which time how many more trillion, billion, even if they had survived that long, would be taken. So to make people look at the photograph, it's got to be outstanding. You've got to apply a bit of thought to it. Now, I do want to just talk for a little bit about multiple exposures, because it's something that I know Rebecca and the Guild wanted me to just address. So I'm doing it in this context. And I use multiple exposures in camera in a number of different ways. The first way that I use it is in recording place. And these are 3 shots merged in camera of a place in Hull called Humber Street, which is quite a lively place normally. This was taken a couple of years ago, not recently, as you can see, and on quite a nice sunny day. And the camera takes in both sides of the street, and then a central shot, which shows the woman working towards us. You do have to practice with this a bit to get the right angles and the right shots, but it can be quite effective, I think. Another way that I've used it, again, this is part of the Red Dress series. Many people won't have seen this because it wasn't in the exhibition, and it isn't actually in the book either. But this was 2 shots taken at a picnic area, camera on the tripod, and we can see the red dress both hanging in the tree and on the picnic table. That happened to be called Haunted as part of the show. You can make of it what you will, but it's a different way of using multiple exposures. As in this, I was commissioned to shoot this person, an artist called Chrissy Collinson. And Chrissy Collinson had a grant from the Arts Council to paint scenes from what are called the 10-foots in Hull. And 10-foots are 10-foot wide passages that run between terraces of houses in Hull. And sometimes they have just bins in them, sometimes they have workshops in them, sometimes people buy cars in them. And they're quite a well-known thing in the city. We went and spent some time looking at how we would take a photograph of Chrissy that showed something about her and her work in the 10-foots. And we came across the piece of graffiti on the right-hand side there, a house disappeared completely, which is actually a Radiohead track as well. And so we photographed her disappearing completely as she moves towards it. We had to do this a couple of times. First time we went, it was quite windy. We got far too much movement in the trees and leaves to make it a decent photograph. The tripod had been blown around a bit. Second time I went back with a bag of bricks to put on the bottom of the tripod, and we got a much better shot. So it worked out quite well, and that was used by her during the 5 exhibitions of the finished work. This is a way of exploring time as well with multiples. This is actually 8 exposures in camera again fixed on a tripod, pointing at the Ferrans Art Gallery, which is in Hull, and 8 shots taken at different times. You look very carefully, you can see the same wheelchair in 3 of those going along the pavement. But it was actually 8 shots, and you can see the bus, the ghost car, the ghost people, and it gives a sense of movement and time. And this one I took the other day. I wanted to show something abstract. This has got 2 photographs with in-camera movement. The first is of grass, tall grass. It was quite a windy day, so it was moving about a bit. And the second is some poppies in a field near me, not the same poppies behind me. And they were merged in camera to give a nice sort of abstract effect. So using that technology that you have in whatever way, you can do this just easily in Photoshop. Just happens on my camera, does it, and gives me good quality reproductions. You do have to practice a bit with it, but it's well worth doing. So finally, I want to just talk about how we should preserve photographs. I don't know, more and more art galleries are starting to do this. They're starting to make collections of photographs. MoMA in New York has a great photographic collection of mainly American photographs. The Victoria and Albert Museum in London is the same now. they're beginning to collect and curate photographs, and they've got quite a vast collection. The Museum of Modern Art in Istanbul is my go-to place. They've got a whole floor dedicated to photography, not only exhibiting photography, but they have a huge library. They do a lot of talks there, a lot of classes. Really, really good place. And you think, great, you know, museums of modern art are beginning to take on board the artistic merit of photographs now. And then we've got public collections, the Martin Parr Foundation. If anyone watched Gavin Press talking to Martin Parr a couple of weeks ago in the Gold series, he was talking about the fact that they're building a collection of British photographers down in Bristol at his foundation there. And that's great. So we're going to get different public collections, which are just about photography. Then, of course, there are individual collectors who have private collections of photography, and that's good as well. I don't know about online. I mean, I think online is a good way to show photographs, share what you're doing, talk to and meet other photographers, and I like doing that. I'm always delighted to reach out to other people, and when they reach out to me and we can just talk about what we're doing, I might not always like what they're doing and agree with them, and they might not feel the same about me, and that's fine. That's what it's about. It's about the breadth of photography, the fact that it is so broad. And I think that's great, but I'm not sure it's going to preserve photographs very much. I'm not sure beyond a few places where you can go and really look at photos. It's good for finding stuff, and there are people who post some good stuff, but I'm not sure about the long-term way. Print is another way of collecting this, and I think print's a good way. I think there are more and more books now, which are good. I've been lucky enough to travel to lots of the major museums in the world, major art galleries in the world, but not everybody can do that, and I can't do it at the moment either. So books that preserve stuff, and we can buy and look at pictures. Sometimes it can be cheaper to buy a book, even though they may be expensive and cost you, £80 or £100. Might be a better way of having that permanently available to you. And so things like the Guild magazine, the Royal Photographic Society magazine, things like the British Journal of Photography are all important. And I mentioned frames before, and I've got to thank everyone again for that. Great that people have allowed me to use their work, and I thank them for that. So there's all sorts of ways in which we might choose to preserve photography. I'm not sure that art galleries are always the best. I think that they can introduce people to photography, and that's good. And then I'm just going to, hang on, what am I doing? This is really pretty much my final slide, and it's just a little challenge really to try and apply everything that we've just talked about, and see whether or not you think that it's a good example of art. Art being, of course, a whole sequence of things, and many people use still lives at one point in the art of painting to show their work, to show their skill. I'm not sure that's a very artistic picture, but hey, there we go. If anyone wants to contact me beyond today, this program is recorded on the Guild website. I will also get a copy of that, and I can let people know if they want to contact me. That's my email address on my website, and I'm also on Instagram. So let me know if you want anything. And now it's really over to you in the few minutes left of our hour to make any observations or comments that you might want.
Just before we go on to the questions we've got, Hazel has posted something to do with an event next month, Rethinking Digital Preservation in a Time of Crisis. Hazel, you've actually posted it on panelists. Would you mind putting it on panelists and attendees? And then obviously everybody can see it. It would be great if you could share that. I'm sure people would like it. Moving on to the questions. So the first one is, how far can we allow digital post-processing in an art image?
It's a very good question. I think it's up to people to make that decision for themselves. I do very little post-processing. If truth be known, I try hard to take the photograph I want to take. I know that for many people, post-processing now is perhaps the main way that they get the image that they want to end up with. And that's particularly in some types of photography, I know, because it's not always possible to do things in camera. And I'm sympathetic to that. There are some bugbears that I have, but they're my bugbears, not other people's bugbears. Things like people who HDR and overexposed and underexposed and come with some pretty garish looking photographs, which do nothing for me. The original photograph may have been great and they may have just spoiled it for me by seeing it the way they see it. But if you see something in a particular way and that's how you want to represent it and represent yourself in your work, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just going to feel free to say that's not for me. And I think that's all you can say in terms of judging artistic merits. I mean, there's all the technical things that we can talk about as well. And I'm assuming that everyone watching knows how to set a camera up to take a shot and knows how to get the best pictures that they can. Sometimes you don't always have the time to set your camera up in the way that you would like to, and you're not necessarily going for that. Anyway, you might want something much more moody. So I just think people have to decide. I mean, all my photographs are raw, so I will do some post-processing. They all go through Lightroom. And usually the sort of post-processing that I will do is to crop, to make, if I have to try and get a better composition. If I have to adjust the white balance or the exposure or the contrast, I will. I might just exaggerate the colours slightly through better use of vibrancy or saturation. But I only do that if I'm going to get a particular effect that says for me what I want the photograph to say. And I think it is up to everyone to do that for themselves.
It is an interesting question though, isn't it? I mean, you can go a little bit further and say, when does a photograph stop being a photograph?
Yeah.
I've heard that mentioned many times, because obviously some images are far more about the post-processing and the digital art than they are about the actual elements that have been captured with a camera.
A different way of using a photograph. And I think it's quite legitimate. I've seen some very good stuff. I've got a friend who's an artist and actually paints, but he photographs what he paints, he puts it into Photoshop, and he can end up with some extremely complex pictures with up to 128 layers on and huge file sizes. And that's how he paints, that's how he makes his pictures.
It is, it's fascinating. We had a good quote near the beginning in the questions and answers from Ivan, and I'll read this out because it is quite interesting. In fact, it's very interesting. Does making 3 apple pies make me a chef? No. Does singing a few songs make me a singer? No. Same for taking snapshots versus making photographs with an intent. An artist has an intent when creating, and he can describe his intent when presenting the result. Anyway, it's not a black and white boundary, it's at least 50 shades of grey. I thought that was very good. It's very, very well put. That intent has a key part to the process.
Intent is very, very important, as is interpretation. People who look at the photograph say, I mean, again, there's a great one for quotes, they used to say, when people said to him, there are no people in this photograph, he'd say, yes, there are at least 2. One's the photographer, one's the person looking at it. And that's true for every photograph. The job of the photographer, I suppose, is to try to interpret something and get that interpretation over to other people to make them think about it. The job of the viewer is to interpret that in whatever way they want, and that could be completely different. And I don't think that matters. I think the job of any artist is to try and make people think. If you look at the history of art, you know, it's only very recently we've come to conceptual art. You know, people learned to paint, and then lots of people started to unlearn to paint. So you look at Picasso, and he would say it's much more difficult to paint like a child once you become an adult than it is to paint like a child when you're a child. He's right, of course. And it's much more difficult, I think, to unlearn. Someone asked me the other day about using things like rule of thirds and so on. I said, well, you know, rules are there, but they're also there to be broken. As long as you know what the rules are, you can then decide to do something different. So I think it is a good quote. Making 3 apple pies doesn't make you a chef. And I wouldn't suggest it did, and I wouldn't suggest taking 3 photographs made you an artist either. I think the intent of that and the use of skill is equally important.
I think the undoing of skills and knowing how to break rules as well is a talent in itself. I mean, this is nothing to do with photography, but those that are based in the UK and of a certain age will remember Les Dawson playing the piano. And actually, he was a very acclaimed pianist, but he was capable of playing the piano badly, so it sounded like he was making mistakes. Yeah. That must be a very difficult thing to do, to undo everything that you're taught and is ingrained, to break and bend the rules and do something different.
I think it is, and I think using our imagination, if we think we're going to, there's a shot in there of a rose which I deconstructed, and again, to try to think, I want to shoot a rose, but I don't want to shoot a rose. I want to shoot something different to that. And you know, it takes some days sometimes to come up with the right approach to something.
And obviously a different set of eyes would see things differently. Yeah. If you were to take a photograph of a rose, and I was, and we were told separately this was the challenge, our results would be very different.
I've often been 2 places with other photographers, and what we come back with, having spent an hour photographing around the same area, is always completely different. Their interpretations to things will be very different to mine, and mine to theirs. And that's the beauty. You know, I think you could take photographers to the same place and give them 5 minutes to shoot things, and they would all shoot different things. And that, for me, is the beauty of photography. We're capturing microseconds sometimes, and the microsecond I capture might be different to the microsecond you capture. And the light will be different, the people might be different, the things will be happening differently. And that's the whole beauty of photography for me.
Great quote just been added to the questions and answers from Chris Allen. And it's a quote from Mark Twain. You can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus.
That's excellent, yes.
Never heard that one before. But
I should write that down as soon as we've finished.
And we've also got, how much planning goes into art photography? How does your thought process differ if you're doing an art shoot or, say, a wedding shoot?
Well, it's a very good question. A lot of my exhibition work is around themes. So I like the red dress. There was another exhibition I did last year called Say Something, which is about the challenges of communication between younger and older people. There was an exhibition which is up at the moment called Floral, which is some of the flower pictures in part of that, where I tried to shoot things differently. And for those, the thought process is very long. The red dress took me over 2 years to shoot, shot by shot. The one I'm working on now, which is about lives of older men, has already been going for 18 months and will certainly be another 18 months. Because you don't want to copy things that other people are doing. You have to think things through, think, what is it I'm trying to communicate here? So they're very different. If I'm going to a wedding, I can't really think very hard about that because things are happening all the time in front of you, and your job is to record that for people. Now, you might think about where you're going to position people or ask people to be. I don't do weddings. I hate weddings, I have to say, and I normally refuse to do them. I did one for a friend last year under huge pressure, and I said, I'll do it. so long as you don't expect any formal photographs, I'm going to come and shoot it like a documentary. And that's largely what we did. We did get some photos of some family members together, which were important. But I think when you're doing, most wedding photographers I know will have an idea of where they're going to shoot. They'll have an idea of where they would like people to stand. They might want to make that very artistic, and I've seen some great, quite artistic photographs come out of weddings. But nonetheless, things are happening all the time, and it's more like a documentary of that day and that time for those people. I don't think you always, if you haven't thought about it beforehand, you're not going to get a lot of time on the day to change your plan.
Another good one just been dropped into the inbox. you really put yourself up for something here, Nigel, haven't you?
I know.
It's great. It's thought-provoking, and it's really good. This one's from Ian. Are photography and photographic art two different things?
Well, potentially. I mean, I think Ian's got to answer that one for himself, really. I don't know whether I have an answer. If you're asking me for a statement about that, I would say yes, because it's about intentionality and it's about the thought processes. And if you're thinking hard about things and you have an intention to show something that isn't just a snap, then fine. I still take snaps. I go out with my camera pretty much every day and I take snaps, and a lot of them snaps. Sometimes I'll see something and think, I'm going to come back and do that in a different way. And I'm going to think about how I do it. Sometimes I'll go out and I'll take something with me. Just things like a sheet of plastic. Take a sheet of plastic with you and shoot that scene through a sheet of plastic and see how much it changes. It's just like using filters. That's all it is. And you'll get something different. So, you know, I don't know. Ian, what do you think?
Yeah, Hazel's just put on the chat that photography can be art. It is no longer separate.
Good.
So, yep, like you say, these things are all open to debate, aren't they? And they're fascinating. I think without doubt, photography is art, in my view. There's also an immense amount of skill to it. That to actually photograph something and do it well, or photograph something and break the rules, like you say, there's an intent to it and there's a skill to it. It makes it stand out. But the beauty of this is, we're not now just talking about an image here. What we're talking about is the craft itself. And the very fact we're having a discussion and a debate about the craft is great in itself. It's not just about learning to use the camera, not just learning to do other things. It's about interpretation. And that Mark Twain quote keeps coming back to me. I think that is so good. But yeah, it's been a great hour. There's no more questions in the inbox. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, particularly those that have got up at silly o'clock. Just
I hope it's been worth it, but you've asking yourself some questions now. I think if I was to add one last thing, Steve, it is very often these days I get into conversations which are just about the technicalities, and my personal mission, if I have one, is to move beyond that and to get into not just the technicalities, but the thinking in terms of photographs as well. And if I've achieved that today and made people think, that's great. So
well, the chat is saying you have. There's a lot of conversation going on in there from people saying thank you, what a great presentation and everything.
Thank you.
Contact details are on the screen. So they're there for you to join him. Tomorrow we have got Gavin speaking to Frances van der Merwe. There's a great story behind her work. Fantastic photographer who grew up on a farm in South Africa before moving to England, and that's another good session. That's at 10 a.m. tomorrow. It'll be a great interview by him. For anybody here that's not a member, I put the referral code on. That's Nigel's personal code. If you want to use it to join us, free do. We have members around the world. Please feel free. But can I just thank you all for joining us? Hope the weather is better wherever you are than what we've got here. And stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.